This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com and GatheringMagic.com, your place to explore the game.
Hi, my name is Thomas van Vught, and this is my Nicol Bolas Dragon Tribal EDH deck. Alright, so Nicol Bolas. He costs 8, which is quite expensive, but he gets a 7/7. He's one of the original Elder Dragons on which this format was based. And he has a downside and a very good upside. His downside obviously is that you pay 3 mana every upkeep to keep him alive. But his upside is that whenever you do this damage, and not just combat damage, but any kind of damage whatsoever, you get to any opponent, they discard their entire hand. There are a few cards in this deck that let you deal direct damage, which isn't combat damage, and that's very effective when it comes down to it. So, cool. I'm running 3 snow-covered mountains. I'm running 2 snow-covered swamps and 2 snow-covered islands. And the only reason they're snow-covered is because I like them, and possibly hoping for a snow-themed set later on in Magic's life. But yeah, well, so I'm running the 3 artifact lands. And they're there to be tutored up by Tezzerets if possible, and they count as artifacts for things like Hellkite, whatever his name is, but I'll get to him in a second. I'm running the 3 Ravnican Shocks. I'm running the 2 new battle lands, which usually come into play tapped, but you can search for them with any of your fetch effects, and if you don't need the mana that turn, you can leave the shocks to be fetched up on the turn where you do need the mana. So they're not too bad in my opinion, but there we are. I'm running the 3 fetches, obviously. I'm not running the off-colour fetches. It's not what I like to do. I don't like having those colours represented in this deck in any way. I'm also running an Evolving Wilds, which is slightly less effective than his big brothers, obviously. But this art is really nice, and it helps me with my mana fixing, so there we are. I'm running the 3 temples, which help me get the draws I want in the early game, or later game, or anything in that matter. I'm running Crumbling Necropolis, which is fine. I'm running City of Brass, which is another one which tap for all mana, which is fine again. Command Tower is one of those cards which most people will tell you is really good, and it is, so there we are. People don't lie to you necessarily. Haven of the Spirit Dragon. This is obviously a dragon deck, so having a land which can bring back any of my dragons from my graveyard to my hand is quite good. And it gives me the option of getting the Yugen Planeswalk card back to my hand as well. So it's a good card for this deck. Forbidden Orchard is... the downside of this is that you give your opponents a small 1/1 without flying, sorry. And that isn't a very big downside, because most of our creatures will have flying and will be larger than a 1/1. Cavern of Souls obviously makes all your creatures uncounterable. That's good. And well, all the dragon creatures uncounterable. There's a few non-dragon creatures in here, but that's fine. The big high-end cards in this deck are going to be dragons. Reflecting Pool is quite important because Nicol Bolas costs 2 of each colour he uses, and that can be quite difficult sometimes to get, so having the option for Reflecting Pool of getting that extra 1 colour that you might need is really nice. Volrath's Stronghold gets me later in the game I can recur one of my dragons to my hand, to the top of the library, and that's quite effective if you really need to get one of your dragons back. The altar is by Marta Molina as well. Reliquary Tower is obviously it's a normal card, doesn't do much. If you have too many cards in your hand, you can keep them instead of having to throw them away, so it's not a bad effect to have when you need it. Vesuva copies anything you want, and that's nice. So. Spinerock Knoll has a hideaway effect, and to get the hideaway card, Into play, you need to do 7 damage in a turn and then tap this, which is quite easy to do with a deck with a lot of big creatures. Mutavault is great. It's not very big as far as a card goes. It doesn't do too much, but it helps with once you dragon count. It can affect. You can benefit from all of your tribal cards in this deck, and it only costs 1 mana to make it a 2/2 dragon in this case. So it's a nice land, especially for one of those man lands. I'm talking about man lands. Creeping Tar Pit is the only one I'm running apart from Mutavault, because this gives you a 3/2 unblockable, and unblockable is nice when it comes to things like planeswalkers and just getting the extra bit of damage through if you really need to finish a game off or anything similar. I'm running Ancient Tomb, which is it can tap 2 mana. It will, you have to pay 2 life for it to tap that way, but it's still very effective and it speeds up your play, so it's good. Nothing bad to say, really. Thunderbreak Regent is my cheapest dragon. There are not a lot of dragons that cost 4 mana which are actually playable, because most of them have really big downsides or are just not very good in that sense. But this is good. It's fine. It's a 4/4 flying, only costs 4, and it helps. It deters your opponents from targeting any of your dragons because it will do 3 damage. Obviously, 3 damage isn't a lot, so having them, but just that extra bit of damage to make people think twice about targeting your dragons willy-nilly, it's effective. My friend runs an Olivia deck, and Olivia will target your dragons to make them vampires and then steal them. But every time she does that, they'll have to lose 3 life, so that's nice. I'm running Stormbreath Dragon. It's a flying and hasty dragon with a monstrosity ability, which is quite effective in EDH, because most people want to have a lot of cards in their hand, so dealing all that extra damage is quite nice. Skithiryx is one of the 2 infect cards in this deck, and the main reason he's in here because he has regenerate, or she's in here, is because he has regenerate and infect, and that's very nice for a blocker to have, because it will tell people to not come your way with their attackers if they want to have still have a big attacker at the end. So it's very effective in that way. I don't usually run or attack with effects because most people do not like you when you do that. So, well, Scourge of Valkas is great. It's great. It's really good. It synergizes very well with Nicol Bolas, because you don't have to do combat damage with Nicol Bolas to have your opponent discard a card. You only with this in play, you would only have to cast Nicol Bolas to have someone discard their hand, which is very effective, especially because most people will try to kill Nicol Bolas as soon as they are able. Keiga the Tidestar and Kokushu are both the Kamikawa dragons. They have a effective death trigger, so when they die you get a very good ability, and that's the nice thing about having those 2. Plus they're nice dragons. So I'm running Niv-Mizzet Dragon Genius instead of the Dragon Mind, or whatever his name is, because this one draws less hate and is slightly more synergistic in this deck, even though the other one is slightly better. But I find with the original Niv-Mizzet is you tend to want to build around it because it's very easy to build around. But this deck doesn't benefit from building around Niv-Mizzet at all. So why not run this one, which is slightly nicer, slightly friendlier. 2-headed dragon is a classic dragon. It's a very good attacker, it's a very good blocker, it doesn't do much else, but it's a nice card. Then we've got Steel Hellkite. It's an artifact dragon, it's nice, it deals damage. Whenever it deals damage, you can destroy enchantments or artifacts or anything, basically anything they control with a mana cost X. And that's very nice to have, because especially when someone has a lot of tokens, just paying 0 once you attack them and destroying all their tokens is very effective. Plus, it's one of the ways for Grixis to get rid of enchantments, which Grixis is very famous for having trouble dealing with. Got Croesus the Purger in here. And Croesus the Purger is Nicol Bolas' tiny brother, who is very ineffective in comparison. However, on his own, it's quite okay, and does what it wants to do. and it's nice to have that extra effect just to make sure that you have something similar to that. Dragonlord Silumgar, or Silumgar, sorry, is very thematic. It's got a nice feel to it. It's very evil, and that suits Nicol Bolas quite well. I'm also running his younger self, which is more tribal commander in that sense, tribal dragons, and yeah, it's one of the more effective ones when it comes to that. Got Hellkite Tyrant, which is it's basically, it lets me steal everyone's mana rocks, and if I have 20 artifacts in play at the same time, then I can win the game in the upkeep. However, that's very unlikely, but it's still a nice card nonetheless. This is the card most people will tell me, why are you running this? This is terrible. But it isn't. It's not that terrible. It's actually a 6/5 dragon with haste, which gives all my other dragons haste. That other piece of text there is completely irrelevant. It's flavor text. It doesn't do anything. But it's giving all my dragons haste. It's a very nice effect to have, especially since this deck doesn't do too much with hasty effects. And is on a dragon as well, so it synergizes with everything in the deck. And tutoring for this with Dragonstorm will give the other cards you tutored with Dragonstorm haste as well, and giving you a big attack, which is very effective. Good card. Got Scourge of Valkas, which is amazing. Whenever you attack the player with the most life, you get an extra attack step, so only having 2 dragons in play and attacking twice with them is still almost 20 damage, so it's a good card regardless of how many dragons you have, and it's basically always a very nice card, especially when you're back. The only downside obviously is it doesn't do much if you're already winning and people are already dying, but then, well, you can't complain too much anyway then. I've got Ebon Dragon here. Ebon Dragon isn't a very good card, but it's a nice card, it's fine. It's a small effect, people won't get too annoyed when you play it, and it's a very nice art. I will say it's nice having dragons in this deck which aren't partly red or mainly red, because if someone plays something like destroy all red creatures or deal 10 damage to all red creatures, we're quite we can be quite affected by that, because most of the dragons we play are red. So having a black dragon is quite nice. Knollspine Dragon just gets me extra cards. It's basically a wheel effects, and it's more effective as a wheel effects when you've done more damage. But we can do quite a bit of damage in this deck, so it's a good card to have as an extra at the end. Bladewing Risen is a very good card. It gives me an extra dragon when I cast it, because most of the time there will be a dragon in my graveyard around that time. So having that extra dragon for 7 mana is always quite effective. And it has, you can give your dragons +1/+1, which is almost never irrelevant, but now and again you can use it. Udvara Hellkite is the one card every player who plays dragons will say is probably one of the better dragons you can get. Because it's basically whenever any dragon you control attacks, you get an extra 6/6, which you can use for blockers, triggering dragon effects, and doing anything you want. And it's very effective. Okay, so those were the dragons. So onto the Sakashima the Imposter. It's not the most optimum clone effects, however, it has the ability of copying a legendary creature, and a lot of the dragons in my deck are actually legendary, so having the ability to make a copy of Nicol Bolas or of Bladewing the Risen or any of the fun cards is very nice to have as a clone, especially if you want to be copying your own dragons. In the same sense, I've also got the Clever Impersonator, which lets me copy anything I want, which is effective, is versatile, and I've got Lazav, which is just another clone, which gives the cloned creature hexproof, but it can only clone your opponent's creatures, so that's fine. And I like my my clones costing 4 mana, so that's probably why those are the only ones I'm running. Got Dragon Master Outcast, which is a very effective card if it stays around long enough. Otherwise, it will be attacked or it will eat removal for the most part, because people do see it as a threat. If they don't and they forget about it, if they're stupid enough to do that, then you can get quite a bit of value out of having the extra 5/5 every turn just by having 6 land. Baleful Strix is great. It's amazing. It's just an extra. It's a 1/1, but it has flying, death touch, and you get an extra card when you play it. It's always a good card. It's always nice having that extra death touch on hand just to block something annoying. I've got Gilded Drake, which is also very annoying. People don't like you playing that too much. It's a you steal your opponent's best creature and give them a very boring 3/3 flying. And because most of your dragons are going to be bigger than a 3/3 flying, then it's even worse for your opponents to have that small Drake flying around. Very good card. Thassa, God of the Sea, which is an enchantment. It's indestructible. It's not a creature because you will almost never have enough blue mana symbols to make it a creature, but that's okay. It gives you It gives you a scry every turn. And you can make creatures, one of your creatures unblockable, or multiple creatures unblockable. So that's very nice, especially to get a lot of the damage through, and it's very cheap for what it does. Got Disciple of Bolas, which is flavorful, is on theme, and is very effective and gives me quite a lot of cards if I sacrifice any of my creatures. But especially if I sacrifice one of my Kamigawa dragons, I will also get the death trigger on top of that. So I get someone, for example, with Keiga, I get their creature plus 5 life, plus 5 cards, and the only thing I have to sacrifice is one of my creatures. So that's very effective. I'm not going to pronounce his name because I'm going to pronounce it wrong. So I'm just going to talk about the card, which is fine. I love this art. It's a very nice looking card. Its effects, it says you can return target black card from your graveyard to your hand. It can be any card you control, you have, as long as it's black. And most of my effective cards have a bit of black in them or anything. So most of the things I do once a recur will have black. But otherwise, it's a free to basically unblockable card, and it's very nice to play. But it looks really good, so for fun. Yeah, Necrozar is one of those cards where you probably would put it in as its own commander and its own deck because it will be more effective then. But this playing it in this deck gives you the option of just having the speed up the game and playing just the extra, getting an extra card, making people lose life, and especially when they're greedy and they want to draw even more cards, then you can give them, it deals a bit more damage to them, so it's nice. Cover of Darkness, onto the enchantment. Cover of Darkness is almost a gem in that sense. It's very cheap tribal effects. You can choose one of your creatures, or a creature type, sorry, and all your creatures of that type gain fear, so they can't be blocked except by black creatures and or artifact creatures. And it's basically, in the right matchup, you can play this and all your dragons will be unblockable because no one, you will be playing against a green deck or something, or a blue deck, and you won't be able to do much. Your opponents won't be able to do much except destroy this enchantment, possibly. Dragon Tempest is the best card in this deck, hands down. It gives all my flying creatures haste, and most of my creatures have flying. And it lets me do the Scourge of Valkas ability, where whenever a dragon comes into play, you can deal damage equal to the amount of dragons you control. And that works very well with Nicol Bolas as well, because with Nicol Bolas you can then have someone discard their hands, and it's just a very good card, and it only costs 2 mana, so it's very nice. Bitter Blossom is great early in the game because it keeps you up into the game with enough blockers so that your opponents don't deal 20 damage before you end up getting dragons or whatever. So it's nice for having those extra blockers. Later in the game it's not too good, but it's effective enough in the early game that I want to run it in the deck anyway. Lane Line of Anticipation, it gives everything flash basically, and yeah, so you can play in your own opponent's turn and be more reactive and do what you want. So it's just a slightly change of shift and makes the games more interesting possibly. Crucible Fire makes your dragons even bigger and dragon-eared. So it's a good card in that sense. Your Nicol Bolas will become a 10/10, which is still not enough to hit someone 2 times and kill them, but it is effective and scary in that sense. Flame Shadow Conjuring, it gives you an extra dragon or gives you an extra creature by just paying 1 red mana extra, which is very nice, especially with something like Udvara Hellkite, which is very effective to copy with this, or one of the Kamigawa dragons, because even though it says exile at the beginning of the next end step, if you play a legendary dragon and you copy it, it will die straight away. So with the Kamigawa dragons, you will make a copy which will then die, so you get the effects without losing your dragon by just paying 1 red mana more, which is nice. Tainted Strike is the only other infect card I play in this deck. You can target someone else's creature when they're attacking with a very big creature and then kill someone out of nowhere. You can target your commander, and then you will still do quite a bit of infect damage just by doing that. And funnily enough, even if it's infect damage and not actual damage, it will still count as commander damage. So you'll do 7 or 10 possibly commander damage in addition to infect counters. So it's very nice to put onto everything else. Darkness is a card most people don't see coming, and it's good. You can get people out off guard with this. It will prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn. If someone attacks you with a lot of creatures, they won't necessarily see this coming, so it's nice having the ability to just stop them in their track and be safe about that. Also, it leaves them completely open and stuff, so it's nice. Disdainful Stroke is my only counter in this deck. It's the art's nice, it fits with the theme of the deck. It only costs 1 blue and 1 colorless in comparison to Counterspell, which costs 2 blue, because it's easier keeping that up than keeping up 2 blue in a deck which isn't mainly blue in that sense. So it's better. I like this in a 3-color deck. Obviously, you can only counter stuff that are quite expensive, but that's usually the ones most people don't complain about too much if you counter it, so it's nice. Blackstorm Zenith, most people will tell you this is good, it is good. There's not much to say about it. It's a board wipe, so it's fine. Rakdos Return isn't very thematic, but it's you can pump some extra mana in it, get some extra damage through, and have target player discard X cards, which does fit with the deck. Wheel of Fortune is a card anyone will tell you is good, so I'm not going to stay with that too long. Praetor's Grasp is very nice, especially with the new commander rule, because you can now search target opponent's library for a green card or a white card or anything, and we can actually cast it by using one of our multicolored lands, because we can then tap for green mana or white mana to actually play it. And this is just, it's been improved by the new rule effect, so it's a very nice card. Show and Tell is better in 60 card formats, however it's still quite nice in this deck, especially because if you have everyone discard their entire hand, then play this to get a cheap card. It's very effective. In the early game, now and again, you can play this to speed up the game and just change the pace of the game, make it slightly more interesting if you do it now and again, as long as you don't do this every single time. But it's a nice card in that sense. Soul's Fire is a way of having Nicol Bolas deal his damage directly to an opponent without having to attack, and obviously having them discard their card, their hand, so that's nice. Crooks of Fate is a board wipe which targets all non-dragons for the most part, which is very effective again. Bribery is always a good card. You can just get their best creature. Most people play a really good creature, so this is just basically always really good. Heart the Water Veil is the only extra turn card I play. It's quite fair. It's not the most efficient. I like having access to at least one of them, and this is the one I chose. But yeah, all this dust is very effective. It's a board reset. It will kill most things except a few artifacts and colorless creatures. It's slightly worse with more Eldrazi in play, obviously, but it's nice having an option to get rid of things like enchantments and everything similar. Cruel Ultimatum is very one-sided. You can set someone back quite a bit whilst you run ahead, which is very effective and is very flavorful for Nicol Bolas. Dragonstorm is it's a tutor for dragons, except you can tutor multiple dragons at the same time if you have enough mana to do so. And usually I can get this up to 2, so that's easy to do. Getting this up to 3 is quite difficult, and I haven't gotten this up to 4 at all. But this is very effective if you search your library for Bladewing the Risen and Dragonlord Kolaghan, because then you get 3 dragons and they all have haste and you can attack straight away. Onto Planeswalkers. Jason Mind Sculptor, most people will tell you this is good. They're right, it is good. It's fine. It doesn't synergize necessarily with the rest of the deck, but it's very good card advantage and everything similar. Got Tezzeret the Seeker, which seems like an artifact card. However, in this deck, it's a ramp card. It does everything I want it to do to get some extra mana. I can search my library for mana rocks, and I can search my library for the artifact lands, and then I can untap them and to just get more mana. And that's basically what this card is. It's a ramp card, and I love that for that effect. It's a shame it does. I actually prefer the name of Tezzeret Agent of Bolas more, but that card's very artifact centric, and this works a lot better in this deck. Sarkhan the Mad is it works really good with this deck. You get card advantage. You can have target creatures controller sacrifice it, and then it gets a 5/5, or you can have all your dragons deal damage to equal to their power to target player, which is very effective. And you can do that straight away once you've cast them. So that's why he's so really good. I've got Ugin, the Spirit Dragon, and Nicol Bolas, the Planeswalker. They mirror each other very well. They're very effective at what they do. Basically, as soon as you play them, they will both do really good stuff. Onto the artifacts, the last section. I've got Soul Ring, which is everyone should run. It's a really good card. I've got the 2 Talismans, which are also very good. I've got Chromatic Lantern, which is fantastic. I'm always looking forward to drawing this. I'm running the Darksteel Ignite and Manalith, and they both tap for any color, which is nice, especially with things like Praetor's Grasp, so you can tap for the green and white mana you want. And I need some extra mana, so they are. And I've got Coalition Relic, which is very effective. You can either tap for 1 each turn, or tap for 2 each 2 turns, and you can untap it with Tezzeret and make it even better. And it's just a very good card. And then I've got finally I've got Gilded Lotus, and Gilded Lotus will accelerate me from turn 5 to turn 8 basically, and that's the cap of my cards. All my cards cost 8. The most expensive cards in my deck cost 8, except Dragonstorm, which costs 9. But having this just to get the extra mana to get there a bit earlier is very effective. And that's my deck. Thanks for watching CMDR Decks. Please favourite and subscribe.